Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for coming along to hear about Elie and Earlsferry Golf Club makers. I don't need a microphone, can everybody hear?
Yeah.
I would like you to consider this statement here. 99% of people in East Nuke have heard of James Braid, but I would guess that the same percentage has probably not heard of George Forrester. Just by way of continuing the introduction, just to give you an idea of what I'll be going through over the next 3 hours. First of all, an introduction, which I'm currently doing, and then I'll move on to 3 of the golfers that I've identified. Maybe a quick chat about some of the other club makers, and lastly will be a conclusion and questions. So, where to start? Try to imagine that we're back in 1880. Why then? According to what I've been in my research, I think that's round about the time where we were at a critical part of golf club development by way of innovations and improvements to golf clubs. A census in Earlsferry in 1881 says that there were 291 persons living in Earlsferry, and at that time 129 were male. Earlsferry was at that time fast becoming a centre of excellence for golf. There were many notable players. I've listed some of them there: Douglas Rowland, George Keddy, the 6 Simpson brothers, and of course James Braid. There were others, but I'm just naming a few. Our knowledge in these players is well documented. But what about the club makers? This is where I come in. Way back in 1986, this subject was raised about local club makers, and I was appalled at the thought that there was little or no evidence about golf club making in a borough at all. So I looked up my notes before to do this presentation from 1988, and I had written, "Get the clubs and try and build up supporting narrative along the way." I should say at the start, Elie Golf House Club has sponsored this project from the very start, and make no mistake, without their support this project would never have happened. So where do we start? I had a blank sheet of paper, a blank mind to go along with it. I got help from Peter Lewis of this museum, the R&A historian at that time and past captain of Elie Golf House Club, Bobby Burnett, and local club maker John Reekie, when I could get a word in above Jenny Reekie. With the steady accumulation of clubs over the years, a picture began to emerge, and by the millennium I became aware that there was a tremendous, in my view, untold story about golf club making in Elie and Earlsferry. Before we start, a little bit of background is necessary. Elie Golf House Club is probably famous for its first hole, and no doubt many of you have heard the marvellous tale of a golfer who just commenced their round and went over the hill and found an extremely unfortunate lie in one of the right-hand bunkers, and having had a quick look about, resorted to the hand niblick to remove the ball from its awful position, thinking that they were the only one to have seen this, but the whole starter had witnessed the whole event through the lens of the periscope. To save getting bogged down over the correct description of Elie and Earlsferry, because that could be a long argument, I'm just going to refer to it as the borough. Now, the subject of patents and registered designs, the more I looked into this, it requires a wee bit of clarification because it's a very important subject for golf club historians. A patent, I think in theory, works out the way, it protects the way something works, whereas the registered design in theory protects the way it looks. It's also worth noting that patents are very paper intensive, can take a long time to process and can be a tad expensive, whereas registered designs could be obtained relatively quickly and are less costly, which appeals to most Scots. And for the historian, patents and registered designs are a critical audit trail to gain a greater insight into some of the older clubs. Now, to whet your appetite, the past few months has yielded some very exciting discoveries, which I would like to share with you. Well, I found them exciting. Although the borough has produced many club makers over the years, my focus in this presentation features the club makers in the late 19th century, where improvements and innovations were at their peak. I'll deal with these club makers in alphabetical order. The first one is James Crowley, who was born in Earlsferry in January 1861, and having completed an apprenticeship in joinery at the age of 15 or thereabouts, he began working as an apprentice making golf clubs. Where exactly where in Earlsferry I've yet to establish, that's work in progress. He was married in 1886 and the following year found him in the US of A teaching golf and making clubs. He returned by the time of the 1891 census. Now our collection boasts several fine examples of his early clubs, but one had always eluded me. And it's on the slide here. This is a quote from an 1890 guidebook to the Elie Golf Course. That Crowley is the inventor and patentee of the Eureka Golf Club, and visitors might do worse than to add this patent to their stock of clubs. Now, I've been looking for this club for way over 20 years. I've no idea what it was, couldn't find any reference to it in any books, and I've read a lot of books. Nothing. I didn't even know what it was, whether it was a cleek or a putter or whatever. That is until now. In my article in Through the Green, I stated that Crowley always used patents. Wrong. That was an assumption I made, and it showed you the dangers of looking back in time and making your own conclusions. At the tail end of 2021, there was an online auction in Arizona where one of the exhibits caught my eye. This was a club being made by W. Crowley, registered design 263086. I had severe doubts about this, but I sat up until 2 o'clock in the morning because of the time difference to bid for this club. Now, my family will tell you that that's a minor miracle, because I am to computer technology as King Herod is to babysitting. But I successfully managed to bid for this club and got it at, I think, a very reasonable price. And when it arrived back in this country, a quick search into the National Archives revealed it's made by James Crowley. And that was a great relief, because having spent the golf club's money, I would have hated to have made a mistake in that, but I didn't think W. Crowley existed. I'm right enough, he doesn't. So it's James Crowley. And I was very comfortable with that. I thought, that's tremendous, that's great. Until I met another contact of mine who's another hickory enthusiast, and he said, oh, I think I know what you've got here. And he sent me this cutting from the John O'Groats Journal in November 1895. Now I know why it was a John O'Groats Journal, but we're not going to go into that. And if you look at this, it describes the club exactly. To help you with this, rather than looking at things, here is the offending club, which I'm quite happy to pass around the room and people can have a look at it. This is an extraordinary club, in that the main thing to note, there's absolutely no whipping between the head and the shaft. and the whole thing is held together with what he calls a wooden pin, a dowel in today's language, and it's called the, according, I think, if I can get that, it's called the Eureka Golf Club. So I was ecstatic, to say the least, that after all this time, by sheer luck, we've managed to get it. And it is, I think, if you look at it, an extraordinary club, and probably the highlight of our collection, which our collection's about 140 clubs we've got in total. Where were we? Crowley returned to the States in 1901. There's a newspaper report in May 1901 describes him as being engaged in Yankee land. There he was engaged with the Philadelphia Cricket Club. And I managed to get a hold of a reference that they produced in 1904 for him. Now, I've circled one word because that language might have been okay in those days. But, come on, behave yourselves. You know what that implies. Most of the Scots are raving alcoholics, but we managed to get one of the sober ones. After his return to Scotland, Crowley continued to produce golf clubs, and he secured patent 26072, which addresses the problem of adding strength to the neck of the club, which makes it virtually unbreakable. This is the benefit about when you get a patent, you get a full description of what the person getting the patent was trying to achieve, together with a full description. You don't get that with a registered design. Registered designs will only give you a date, and from that date you then get a clue where to look for adverts or other information from periodicals. But a patent is utopia if you can get one, but there's very few of them. Crowley left D. Snoop for Glasgow in 1911 and became a major retailer in golf clubs with grand premises in Union Street, Glasgow. Our next club maker was George Forrester, and he has been described as one of Scotland's most innovative club makers. By the time he died in 1930, he had probably applied for more patents than any other club maker. His early years found him in the USA, working as a stonemason in Baltimore, and by the time he returned to the East Uke in 1872, he was married that year as well. It was thought that his relatively late arrival into golf club making, coupled with his lack of reputation, would give him little chance of success. The earliest example of one of his clubs, it's on there already, and this is an 1875 play club. So a lot of people like Philip Truitt and others who are experts in this field will know the answer to this, but to show how naive I was, I asked somebody, why is it called a play club? And he said, oh, it's very simple. You arrive in the tee, the ball's in your pocket, and you take the ball out of your pocket, you tee it up, and you use this club to put it into play. Play club. How could I have not worked that out? But there is a 1875, it's one of the oldest clubs in our collection, a Forrester Play Club. From the mid-1880s onwards, Forrester produced the first concentric back or concentrated lofting iron. These clubs were centre balanced with a rounded back under design number 125240. Now I'll tell you what's really interesting about this club, as you can see on the screen there. Could you go back to that one? Thank you. As you can see, its date was 1889. That particular club is brand new. It's never hit a ball in its life. The reason being that one of my golf club friends, David Christie from Glebo Craigs, was a a cleat collector, and I asked him one day, do you have any Forrester cleats heads? And he said yes, and he produced this one. It's never been shafted in its life. And he gifted it to our collection. I had a shaft put on it, so I know it's never hit a ball in anger. So it's quite a unique thing to add to your collection. He also produced, at the same time, one of the first socket head woods under registered design 269117. Now this is where Forrester displayed his commercial acumen. He'd been abroad in the States, and I think he'd gathered up quite a lot of his commercial talents when he was overseas and he came back. As you can see from the advert, he's got it advertised as his patent unbreakable socket club, but it's not a patent, it's a registered design. Now I know it's a moot point, and some of you might think, that's been a wee bit picky, Ronnie. Well, it probably is, but, and who's really, at this stage, who's going to care? But that's what he did. I don't think he ever, I don't think he ever did a patent. I've never come across one yet. So that's his unbreakable net club. With that one and the previous club that I showed you, these two patents or registered designs revolutionised golf club design at that time and certainly went a very long way to establishing Forrester's reputation. I've been fortunate enough to track down at least a dozen of Forrester's registered designs for our collection, but time only permits you to show one more. This slide here, and again, here's one I made earlier. When I pass this one round, you'll see what I mean. This was advertised by a dealer down south as a rare George Forrester master putter. So rare that I don't think it exists. Personal opinion. It might, but I don't think it does. I think what it is in actual fact Forrester's master cleat, produced under registered design 257927, which I think we've got up there, which is July 1895. Now it's a very odd looking club. It's constructed with a straight blade, but at the toe there develops a solid metal knob, which counterbalances the weight of the socket and enables a player to get away a straight ball. If you can bear with me, golf in August 1895, again this is the benefit of having information from the registered design. It gave me a date. And from that date, if you go into some of the old periodicals, it's amazing what you can uncover. And there's an article in Golf around about that time which said, Mr. Forrester has kindly sent us a cleek for trial and experiment. This we have done. And from the appearance of the club, we had some misgivings as to the virtues claimed for it. I don't blame them, having had a look at it. But after a trial, the claim was a sound one. It's not so much the length of the shot as to the straightness of the flight of the ball which surprised us. And we have pleasure in calling the attention of all golfers to have a trial with this club. Praise indeed.
It's double-sided.
It was a chance event in Forrester's workshop that led Elie-based clubmaker Ronald Smith to contribute indirectly to his best friend James Braid's ability with a driver. One of Forrester's customers, John Berwick, who was a very tall man, about 6'4", who wanted to dispose of some clubs and asked Forrester to do that for him. When Smith heard this, he immediately alerted Braid, who hot-footed it round to Forrester's shop and found a number of drivers with very long shafts and flatter lies than his own. Trying one out, Braid soon found the ball flying away into the distance, and he purchased a club for 1 shilling and 6pence, giving Forrester a profit of 6pence on the transaction. Now, here's a contentious issue. Forrester claimed in a letter to Golf Illustrated that he invented the mashie. This claim's always been hotly disputed, but let me give you some food for thought. In a letter to the Westminster Gazette in 1911, it clearly states that the correspondent was directly informed by one of the local club makers in Elie regarding a club to mash the very long grass. In addition to this, there had been an unbelievably long dispute. Well, why should I tell you about this? But we're very fortunate to have in our audience tonight the chair of the Elie Historical Society, Graham Johnson, who will tell you, how long did this court case go on for?
Well, it started in 1813, well, the court case 1814, and eventually it was concluded in 1878. There were a lot of very rich lawyers as a result.
Yeah, and at about 1878, a further action was raised against the management of the golf club and George Forrester in particular, who is both greenkeeper and club maker. And this action read that golfers did not have the right to either cut or indeed carry away grass from any part of the golf course in Earlsferry. The ingredients are all there. Long grass, local club maker, de facto greenkeeper, supporting Forrester's claim. Oh, I rest my case. Surviving Forrester clan, who gave me several nice shots, but I thought this was one of the better ones. And the next slide depicts his shot in 1905 with a whole bunch of eager people waiting to go out and try their luck in the links. Apart from golf, Forrester also served in the town council and became provost in 1899. Our next golf club maker was Andrew Herd Scott, who was born in Earlsferry in September 1875. He was a nephew of George Forrester, whom he served as early apprentice under before moving to Prestwick to work alongside Charles Hunter. When Scott returned to Earlsferry, he set up his own business, and by the time he was a mere 20 years old, he successfully patented the Unbreakable Neck Golf Club under patent 21444. Now, once again, we've been very fortunate because this is a patent. We've got full information on it. Now, rather you read right through it, I've just given you the diagram of what he was trying to do. Basically, this was an improved method of attaching the shaft to the club head, making the connection extremely strong and practically unbreakable. This also gave a better balanced club with more spin to the head, as a consequence gave greater power to the stroke. By the turn of the century, sales of clubs under this patent exceeded 7,000. One of Scott's other well-known clubs at that time was a straight line putter, the design number 349407. Scott was a very fine player as well, with open finishes of 6 in Muirfield in 1896 and again 6 at Prestwick in 1903. Another important element of Scott's success was his connections to the royal family. Scott had succeeded Forgan of St Andrews as club maker to HRH, Prince of Wales, which earned him the right to use the Prince's heraldic badge in his advertising from 1902 to 1910. Upon his coronation at George V in 1911, Scott became club maker to the King and devised a crown mark together with a lion to stamp in all his clubs. Now, here's a copy that I managed to obtain with permission to reproduce it. of Scott's letter to Sir William Carrington, who's Keeper of His Majesty's Privy Purse, and it confirms his appointment, or thanks him and confirms his appointment as golf club maker to the King. On a much lighter note, Scott also gave lessons to royalty, including the Duchess of Connaught and her playing partner, Princess Pat, who was Lady Princess Ramsay. Alistair Drysdale, in his centenary history of Elie Golf House Club, narrates a wonderful tale of a golf match involving the Princess and Scott against two of the local gentry, where at the 17th hole, with the state of the match very keen, Scott drove a very long ball and the Princess topped the next shot into the bunker, whereupon her caddy, who was totally besotted with this game, blurted out, "Oh, great Christ, your Royal Highness, you've buggered it now." Scott sent the caddy home for this outburst. Scott was one of the first to embrace new technology. Mechanisation had arrived, and by 1896 or thereabouts, he had a 10 horsepower gas engine alongside a copying lathe. Now, to understand the commercial impact of this, instead of producing clubs one at a time, Scott could now produce 40 club heads an hour. That's quite a significant change. I remember being asked earlier on, were any of these guys good golfers? And the bottom line is yes, they had to be, because when you're making clubs one at a time, the only way you'll know if it's any good is you have to take it out and play with it. I would certainly have not made a club maker. Our collection features many older clubs. Although we've got that, we have a full set of about 1930 Scots and Wood by courtesy of one of our past members, Ian Sutherland, who'd had these clubs restored to pristine condition. Here's a photograph of Scott's premises in Earlsferry. You will note that he had a brand shop at Balcomie, Links and Creole. I think he also had quite a bit to do with the design of the golf course at Balcomie, but I've yet to research that.
Yes, he did, Ronnie. He did, and not only that, he was invited to plan a golf course at Lago Ward. Never came to much.
Well, that's good. That's another string to his bow. He also had a branch shop in Burnt Island, which he opened up in 1905. Researching these club makers has been a rewarding task, and it would never have yielded as much detail without input from the surviving members of all three of these makers. In particular, my thanks go to the Scott family, who not only gifted some 15 clubs to our collection, but also gave over for safekeeping Andrew Scott's personal leather-bound album. Now, this was a very humbling experience, being given this by the family, and I'll show you a couple of pictures and a couple of pages inside, but it's pretty big. I think you managed to identify one or two people.
I see Dorothy Campbell here. I can't read the other names at the moment.
This album is a treasure trove in itself, and I'm hoping that we're going to get some funding to do some restoration works on it, and when we've done that, I hope it will go on display for all to see, because it really is a marvel, and the fact that it survived all this time is also amazing. After these early club makers came many others in the borough. Tom Reichy and his son John Reichy, James Forrester, who was the son of George, and also James Sunter. Now, I'm sure one or two of you may have heard or may know or have knowledge of other so-called makers, and all I will say on that is I did come across several other hickory shafted clubs bearing the stamp of Elie and Earlsferry, but I've yet to establish conclusively that these clubs were indeed manufactured in the confines of the borough. On one particular maker, I know that the clubs were produced in a garage in Whistle. To conclude, it cannot be emphasised strongly enough that through this small borough in East Neuk of Fife came three extremely skillful and influential individuals who've left their own distinctive mark on the early development of golf clubs. And through their doors came a host of eager apprentices who not only learnt the art of club making, but who then travelled widely throughout the United Kingdom and overseas, becoming responsible for even more development and knowledge of this wonderful game. It would be my hope in the not too distant future that the Elie Golf House Club collection and all related artefacts will go on permanent display. Thank you for listening.